Hi, this is Pat Gahn, manager of the Ubuntu Server and OpenStack team. Here today from the Ubuntu Developer Summit for June 2014, coming to you live from Portland, Oregon. Sorry, I just added that today. I thought it was funny. Anyway, so we're going to talk about systemd and the server. So we've got Dimitri here. He's on, I think, on the core team for a group of folks that are making the move to systemd. And there's been questions about it. We're all curious, with the direction. And so he's going to start with the presentation. But if you guys have questions, I think I have it playing in the background. I did it. I had to do it at some point during the sessions. Anyway, if you have questions, ask at any point on IRC, and we'll also have time for questions at the end of the presentation. Anything else? I think that's it, and I think we're just going to let Dimitri tell us about systemd and the plans. So here we go. Thank you, Dimitri. Here you go. Table is yours.
Okay, thank you. Systemd in Ubuntu for 4010, well, shortly after Trusty cycle finished, we started to plan how we can move all of our products to using systemd by default. So I've prepared a few slides. So the time frame is very, very, very flexible, right? So we're aiming for 1604 LTS to have systemd as PID1 default in its system across the board. To get there, we will only be switching to systemd once it's feature complete and it's ready, because at the moment Upstart is very well integrated across our product board, so we have to make sure that all features work and that it works across all the different use cases before we switch. So we will continue to boot with Upstart by default for foreseeable future. And if you do want to try booting with systemd, you simply provide a kernel command line argument, init equals /lib/systemd/systemd, and then your PID1 will be systemd and not Upstart.
And I can do that. I can starting with Utopia.
Right. Okay. Right. You can even do it in Trusty, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But your mileage may vary a lot. So, for example, in Trusty, a lot of the daemons will not run at all, right? That's fine, right? Because it's just a really, really basic preview. So
if I do it in Trusty, will my system boot?
Your system will boot. You may not be able to upgrade.
Okay, all right.
Or install packages, or remove some packages.
Or use my system.
Or some packages will not work. So,
So basically you can't do it then. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Right? So the situation in Utopic is actually getting better, right? So it boots more and it can install and upgrade more packages. But, we've had this funny week when everyone was in Malta and we broke the archive a few times when people couldn't boot and couldn't do anything. Yeah, we were landing some features, right, to smooth the transition. So it's still work in progress. So we are hoping that by 14.10 it would be ready enough on the server and desktop, such that more advanced users or just normal regular users can start trying out systemd and expect it to behave properly. If we get far enough, and it would be really great, we might be able to switch server and desktop full 14.10 to systemd, but we might not. So I'm not making any promises here.
So before you go to the next slide, there's a question from Chuck, which is from Zool. If systemd falls in the forest, does it make a sound?
Yes, it makes the sound of the night crickets.
So let's see. So for daemons to start and everything to function, then you need both Upstart jobs and systemd jobs installed. Generally, there are a lot of services that are probably going to only have Upstart jobs at this point, right?
Right. So there is a few, and we are migrating them, and slide number 3 in my presentation addresses that. So I'll get to that, and then we can discuss what the caveats are. So one of the biggest problems we've seen is that although systemd units may exist, or init scripts may exist as a fallback, Unfortunately, they are not feature complete with the Upstart jobs. And that's the caveat which we haven't figured out how to track yet. But I'll get back to that. So let me put the presentation back on. So that's our time frame, which once we do, during this migration, we support having Upstart jobs and systemd units, right? Such that we will never support machines booting with just sysv5 init, because we are really not going to support that. That's really not useful. So if your package or your custom jobs or whatever as an administrator ships both an Upstart job and a systemd unit, you're good to go. You can boot with current systems and the future. The other supportable configuration is to ship an Upstart job as you do now, but also add the init script. But there are some additional requirements from the init scripts which haven't been there before, such that you must call update RCD to generate RCD symlinks. That's not happening by default in Trusty, but it is now possible to do in utopic and up. So if you've built your Debian packages with dh install init from Trusty, those packages need to be rebuilt with utopic or higher deb helper, right? So that's kind of, because this all happens in a maintainer scripts of the binary package, we will have to do a lot of no change rebuilds to get those init scripts activated if there was a matching Upstart job in that package. And also, all init scripts, they must have LSB dependency headers. So it's those clunky begin and comment sections which you may have seen before, which declare at which run levels a init script must run and which dependencies it has and what optional daemons it should start. So previously we were not requiring it. Debian has been requiring it for a few stable releases, I believe. So there is only a few packages which don't provide it. Ideally, you should, and it really is a should. So if one doesn't provide LSB headers, then defaults will be used such that your daemon will start on run level 2 sometime late in the boot cycle. If you want to start it early, then you will need to add dependency headers.
Does systemd init or systemd read the LSB headers?
Right. So I don't believe it reads the LSB headers, but what happens is that inserv runs and it generates the dependency-based boot order, and then it generates the symlinks in that order for the rc2.d directory. And then systemd reads that and generates units from that, such that when you try to put into multi-user target, it will exit all of those scripts in order. But because systemd socket activation kicks in, so for example, if one of your init scripts uses a database, for example, and it tries to talk to it, it will get activated dynamically. So it doesn't read all of the dependency headers, but it does provide you features that would help if you have those dependencies declared, right?
So Dimitri, on this slide, sorry.
Yeah.
I've got one question on this slide when you're done.
Yeah, go on.
One thing I don't see in here is a systemd unit only service definition, and I wondered what the plans were there.
Right. So, am I muted? No, I'm not muted. So at the moment, if you install systemd unit only, the package installation will most likely not work, and you will not be able to install the resulting Debian package. Because if your maintainer scripts try to activate the service and your PID1 is Upstart, then that would fail. And you will fail this upgrade. So at the moment, we do not support shipping systemd units only, unless your maintainer scripts are sane and they check that systemd is PID1 and only then try to start services, and otherwise are inert. So
so for the time being, all our services that say the ones that are already Upstart job converted, we need to add systemd unit definitions for those. But
that's the most straightforward path, yes.
That's a migration path thing, so
correct.
In the long term, would you expect us to stop maintaining the Upstart jobs?
If and when we drop Upstart from all of our products, only then we can start discussing supporting systemd units only. At the moment, people will be upgrading to 16.04 with Upstart as their PID1. And so far, we've never been requiring to reboot systems to the new init, and there is no way to re-exec from Upstart to systemd. Thus, I would say that 16.04 should still support running the system with Upstart jobs, such that please don't drop Upstart jobs.
All right, got it, thanks.
Right, and Colin is adding a comment on RC that systemd does parse LSB headers itself as well. Again, not really sure to which extent, but it does do it to some extent. So yes, we should have LSB headers everywhere. I mean, you can drop an Upstart job if you add an init script with equivalent functionality, and you tested that that init script satisfies your requirements both under Upstart and systemd. So you could do that, but it might not be as straightforward because units and Upstart jobs are easier to write than init scripts. Moving on. Here, slightly more details about how to migrate Upstart-only jobs, right? So add a sysv init script, make sure that you have dependency headers, make sure that you source LSB init functions hook, because that provides integration with both Upstart and systemd, such that if you ever add a native systemd unit or you already have a native Upstart job, it does the transparent triggering of the right job. So in the past, we've had some bug reports where people tried to run init script and an Upstart job was already running and the things weren't talking to each other. Now it all does that transparently. The option 2 is to add a systemd unit to your package or your locally maintained daemons, and that way you're also future compatible. At previous virtual UDS, now they're called online summits, we have discussed a third option, which I'm not mentioning here in the slides. It was to run a limited system-level Upstart under systemd, such that systemd, late in its boot process, would start an Upstart instance, read your jobs, and try to execute some of them, especially those that are on the user's local machine. Although we've discussed that, there are no currently active engineering work to enable that, and I'm not sure if we're going to provide that in the future. So, for example, for 16.04, whether we're going to provide that for some of the local jobs that users have installed and haven't been migrated yet. So that's still plans to discuss, and I guess that will come up only in like 15.04 or 15.10 cycle. So what not to expect by 14.10? This is a very optimistic slide. So I don't believe we will manage to migrate the user sessions to systemd. So as you know, all of the user sessions today on the desktop, they are managed by Upstart, which runs as the user, and it manages jobs within your session. All of our desktops use it, and the phone uses it, and we're not migrating that at the moment. So when you do try out systemd on the desktop, at the moment we mean the system init only. Your session init stays as Upstart, and we've made sure that that still works. So that's all fine. Phone is not going to switch to systemd for 14.10 cycle. We have the phone product has its own schedule for release to manufacture very soon, and we're not risking that with a switch to systemd. There is a question like earlier came up that you can try out systemd on Trusty, but you will most likely will not be able to dist upgrade to Utopic if you're already booted with systemd. So for now, we do require people to be booted with Upstart when they're doing dist upgrade to the next release. Well, we will send out notifications later on when we'll start support dist upgrades with systemd.
So, so Dimitri, you just mean that's from moving from 14.04 to 14.10?
Correct. Well,
okay.
And any other later release. So
okay.
16.04.
Okay.
So to dist upgrade to 16.04, you will have to be booted with Upstart from 14.04.
Okay.
And some people were joking and asking me whether we're going to SRU all of the systemd work into Trusty. Well, after we've broke the archive 3 times and had to regenerate roots and Launchpad and manually had to fix a dozen of people's machine over the week when we broke the world during Malta Sprint, I don't think it's SRU-worthy type of change because it brings very limited benefits to the end users and it can be very disruptive, as we found out.
So just to be clear, Dimitri, I was only half joking because I believe that there were genuine questions from the community.
Yeah.
People thinking that 1404 would receive kind of first-class citizen systemd support. So to be absolutely clear to everybody,
yeah.
The support that Dimitri's been talking about for 1404 is really for developer preview only, and 1404 will forever be production recommended to be on Upstart and will never receive systemd support.
Yeah. So,
I think what I've taken away is 1404, don't mess with systemd.
Yeah, don't mess with systemd.
All right, that's my summary.
Yeah. And 1410, you may mess with systemd on some products.
Right, it's a development release though, so yeah.
Yeah.
Mileage may vary.
Yeah, a lot. Right. So, you know, there are loads of things we're working on at the moment. So at the moment we are still working on making sure all of the init scripts are actually executed under systemd. Because at the moment some of them are still not executed because rc2.d symlinks are not provided. And that's very early in like systemd migration. Once we get that working, then we can start working on porting more things to systemd units and it's so on and so forth. There are some boot time integration which is currently missing. So under Upstart currently you do have a very nice friendly recovery environment, such that if your previous boot has failed to reach run level 2 target, well, event in Upstart, then on your reboot you get this very nice menu saying friendly recovery, would you like a root shell, would you like to enable networking, would you want to try booting something else? And at the moment that's not happening under systemd, although there are framework to provide that. And also, there were some little bits and pieces missing. For example, fcheck output wasn't sent to Plymouth by systemd as it happens right now with Upstart. And I'm sure there were many other issues that we'll find down the road. It's just we haven't reached that level of integration yet to say that, you know, systemd is ready and let's find and fix every bug we can. So I guess it's floor for questions now.
So I have a question, and thanks for the summary. It's great, and as a Ubuntu developer, it's going to be. You've made it very clear to me what I need to do for the server packages that I'm looking after in terms of migration. I think there's a separate use case though for server users, which is that. To be clear, so the first use case is Ubuntu developers working on packages in the Ubuntu archive. What do we do about service definitions for those packages? The second use case, which I think exists for Ubuntu server users, is when users install stuff themselves and they set things up. Traditionally, sysadmins know how to install an initd based service definition. And more recently, they've learned how to do the same thing with Upstart, which I think they appreciate because an init script is a pain to write by hand when you just want to install a service. And Upstart definitions are very, very easy to write because they ended up being 5 lines. Now, I think there's a general understanding in the user community that things are moving to systemd. So if they've written custom Upstart scripts, at some point they're going to stop working. At some point, they're going to have to rewrite stuff as systemd units definitions. So what's the story specifically for users who are writing their own service definitions? And at what point will they need to be doing things?
Right. So the story for migrating custom user jobs is not clear yet. right? We do need to get systemd in a very functional state in the archive first before we can open up the floor for people to migrate their own things. We have started an Upstart to systemd guide, user guide, on the wiki on ubuntu.com. I'm not sure what the URL is. I'll try to remember it. Which lists what type of commands from Upstart map to systemd world and how to install your custom jobs. I don't believe we've written a guide of how to map different events and Upstart jobs to systemd units yet, but I think that's something that we should invest into eventually. But I would say that would be something like a 1504, 1510 target, because that's when we're going to start pushing, not pushing, but inviting users to migrate to systemd completely on all of their installations. For now, the easiest way is to make sure you have an init script, because you can write it and you can also test it. And if it fails under systemd, then it's a bug that we'll need to sort out. Yes.
So you're saying a System 5 init script?
Correct. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. So let me just check I've got this right. So for users who are writing their own service definitions at the moment, let's say they're doing it with well, if they're using System 5, I think it's understood that it will carry on working without any issues all the way through the migration, right?
Yeah.
And if they're using Upstart currently, then the recommendation right now is to do nothing because we haven't worked out that migration path for them yet. So essentially what we're saying is, for the time being, carry on doing your Upstart jobs, and nearer to 1604, we will announce what you need to do in order to migrate to systemd units.
Correct. And
okay, great.
James Hunt has pointed me to the systemd for Upstart users wiki page. It already, and I'm trying to broadcast it at the moment, and it already has a lot of information of what different Upstart stanzas mean in systemd world, and it also has a lot of commands how to manage your jobs and how to do the same in systemd, and it even has examples. So it is looking pretty good already. We'll flesh it out more, so you can start out migrating your jobs and use that as a rough guide. And it's a wiki. Please do edit it if you find more type of things that you can add to make it more complete.
Sounds great, and that page actually looks really useful.
Yes.
But from a production environment, where they're often, I think they usually stay on the LTSs, what they should be doing is looking to migrate if they have any custom things they should look to be migrating towards 1604 and using, one of the development roses in between to work through the kinks would be what they would be doing. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I personally so far have tested LXC containers, virtual machines, server and desktop products, right? But for example, I didn't test deploying Juju charms and making them boot with systemd, or for example, deploying cloud instances or cloud init instances with systemd, and those are really big players in our infrastructure. So I mean, and those are things that would still need to support systemd and Upstart homogeneously together, because I presume at some point people would start to make their cloud init configs and all of their charms to be compatible with both inits, especially as we move closer to 1604, and it's something that would still need to work.
Is there any way we're tracking the outstanding things that need to be done? It occurs to me that Juju probably need a bug to say you're going to need to switch, because at the moment I think what it does is it sticks into cloud init, set up Juju, and when it does that, it arranges for Juju to run, probably by adding an Upstart job. So that I'll probably need to switch at some point.
Right. True. I didn't even look into that yet. Right. So, but to be honest, systemd should be functional enough already in Utopic, such that people should be able to run cloud instances and at least do Juju Bootstrap and Juju SSH Machine 0. I think if we can get that working with systemd, that would be a huge win for, for 1410.
Yeah,
Okay, so what I'm asking is really just a kind of,
Oh,
from a
right.
management
Where it's
perspective.
tracked. At the
Yeah.
moment, myself, Martin Pitt, and Steve, and James, we track all systemd work in our head. And at the moment is
Okay.
get init scripts working, get init scripts working. Because once
what
we
I'm
get that working, we
proposing-
can do stuff. Sorry?
What I'm proposing is that we raise a bunch of bugs. Like one will be raised with Juju Core to say this is why you need to switch.
Right.
And these are essentially all bugs that block the final default to systemd switch.
Right.
That you guys need to be aware of. This is the list of things that will break if we switch today, and then we need to get that list down before.
Right.
So I was just wondering if we had any way. Yeah, okay. I'll leave it with you to sort out.
Yeah, I think I'll make a blueprint, and yeah, I'll keep in touch, and I'll email something to Ubuntu Devel to brainstorm that more, because I'm sure there are things that we didn't even think of.
So Colin on IRC, Colin was suggesting, he said we should suggest that people bring up staging servers with 1510 or thereabouts.
Yes.
Once ready, and use that to test migration.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then Mark, MD Deslor, I can't pronounce IRC nicks all the time. How are we going to test all the different insane configurations people have with regards to NFS and SANs, etc.?
We will test insane configurations with regards to NFS and SAN by asking Stefan to do that testing.
And since it's all in your heads, it's easy to assign work to other people like that.
Of course! He already knows about it. Telepathy works. It does a dbus call, and it just works. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that we are tracking a bunch of bugs already. We do tag them with systemd-boot on Launchpad bugs, and that's across the whole project of Ubuntu packages. At the moment, once we've asked people to file those bugs, what we got in return is that a whole bunch of packages didn't run their init scripts. Hence, this is currently the biggest blocker we're trying to resolve. Once that's resolved, I think we can advertise systemd-boot a little bit wider within developer community running Utopic, and probably more to the users once 14.10 is released.
Yeah. So on the NFS and SANS thing, Hallen responded to Deslor, or also known as Awesome Dude, that as it is, I don't think we're doing a multipath root testing unless PP Tracky is.
Multipath root testing. I'm pretty sure. I would guess that doesn't work. That would be the easiest answer. Yeah. But somebody would need to try it.
Anyway, I think there's continuing to be some chatter there.
Yeah.
Some teasing back and forth. So.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, advanced configurations. Yeah, we're not anywhere near to test that. Even on the phone, we have some exceptional challenges because we have we essentially have three type of user spaces out there, because we have an LXC container with Android, which runs its own init. Then we have the system init, which is currently Upstart, and then we have the user session init, which has a lot of custom jobs inside there, and it does all the app launching using Upstart to manage the life cycle and etc. And now, the cool things that we do on the phone is that the init from inside the LXC container can talk over a socket to the system init Upstart via a bridge, and then emit events into the user session and like start and stop your telephony and kill wireless radio and etc. And for us to actually change the system init into systemd, we have to port the rest as well, because suddenly all the bridges break and suddenly none of the events propagate anymore. So from my perspective, I see the phone as a very big challenge, which isn't supposed to be that big of a challenge. I understand that server people and cloud people would care more about NFS and SAN, but I'm not very involved in those at all.
So the cloud init will need work. It's got in order to do what it does and block boot and make sure things happen at certain points. It's got
I've heard Cloud and it works with systemd. I mean, it has units and everything.
What do you think, Scott? Scott, does it? Oh,
it has systemd scripts that someone contributed that I suspect work somewhat on Red Hat.
They're uploaded in Debian as well, I believe.
What?
They're uploaded in Debian as well, I believe. I can check.
Yeah, I doubt that it works in
to the same feature parity
as
the Upstart does.
I mean, I never really reviewed them in the first place, so I doubt that they work there exactly like I would want them to.
Yeah,
so.
Right, I see.
So another thought is with the NFS and SANS question, not only do we need to plan to test and decide which of those edge case configurations we're going to make sure is working in time for 1604, we've also got to expect a flurry of bugs after 1604 is released, with people filing bugs for their edge case configurations that don't work and saying that this is regression, I need it fixed yesterday. We can expect that and we should plan for it.
Correct. We should expect and we should plan for it. And back of my mind, I still hope that we will ship Upstart as a package in 1604, such that people would be able to do init equals Upstart, command line parameter.
That sounds like a great idea. If we could support that as a workaround,
I mean,
because very good.
Maybe it would harm us and delay the migration all the way to 5 years from 1604. What is it, 2104, when it finally goes end of life and people migrate and say, but I have Upstart jobs, 15 years later. But I don't know. Maybe it will all go charmingly easy and everybody ports their jobs very quickly and the whole world will be a better place.
Well, you can just do it step by step, right? At one point you make them, there is a workaround available but it's not installed by default type thing.
Yeah.
And there should be ample warning if you're going to drop it following release. When people enable the workarounds, they can see warnings, etc.
I do have a question, and hopefully people here will know.
You're not allowed to ask questions. You're answering them.
I'm sorry.
What do we do? No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding, Dimitri. But who's going to answer if you're asking? Ask away.
Right. So I've never set up an OpenStack, and I was wondering if anybody would be willing or can or know people to look into setting up OpenStack to work on Ubuntu with systemd units and or the sysv5 init script. Because what happens at the moment is that we disable the Upstart jobs and we run sysv init scripts, which come from Debian, and they do not do the same things that our Upstart jobs do. So the OpenStack deployments on Ubuntu do depend on Upstart because a lot of logic and integration we provide does come from those set of Upstart jobs. And who engineered those?
So I think what you're really describing is, can we get cloud images to work with systemd?
Is that the simplified question?
I think that's what you're asking, and in that case, you need cloud in it to work with systemd. So I nominate Scott.
It's not just cloud images in that case. I mean, he's specifically saying the OpenStack jobs.
So I mean,
and I suspect it's true of basically any.
Oh, you mean the OpenStack package?
Quantum, the neuron, all of those fancy words, the keystone, like all of those things.
Yeah, that's a whole separate side of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suspect, though, in reality, those are
says he's not listening.
The norm in the fact that they don't just work.
Sorry, what?
I suspect that they're not outside the norm. I suspect that more services than not at this point aren't going to just magically work. At least ones that have been, cared for by Ubuntu and added Upstart jobs for, and.
So my question, Dimitri, is what is the... I might know a few OpenStack people. And so the question is, time frame? Like, when is this? Are you hoping that we'll do this in the 1410 time frame, or is this something that we can put on our list for looking further into 1504? What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, when the core and foundations people, when we said that we're gonna, demo and have systemd on desktop and server for 1410, I believe in our minds we excluded the cloud images and OpenStack deployments, right? But I think that a lot of users might expect that to work. So I'm guessing that when 1410 goes out the door and we say try it on the server, first thing you're gonna have like a horde of angry users, and hopefully the horde of angry users will make it work really quickly and we'll SRU it and the life would be wonderful.
We're just trying to set you up for a mean tweet session at the next UDS, man.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think next UDS will need a mean tweet session, definitely. Hashtag Ubuntu and systemd and like see what Google comes up with in 6 months' time, and
There you go.
We need a bunch of work items.
Yeah.
An OpenStack is included in there, which is make sure that these packages, and I guess charms, if charms are installing upstart jobs directly, have been migrated to using systemd units definitions, and we need those not just for OpenStack, and that's a big piece of work, I imagine, to even just to review it all, but also for other server packages.
Well, and the interesting thing is that, because we're going to support OpenStack on 1404 for what, two and a half years, we're going to have to maintain the upstart jobs functional correctly on Trusty and systemd jobs on 1604.
So it's a good thing that the migration plan allows us to have upstart jobs and systemd unit defined at the same time.
Is this because of the cloud archives?
Yeah. So right. I would think that a reasonable target, at least I would think a minimal target in reality, is we need to have the cloud images booting with systemd by at least supporting that by 1410, because then you can realistically start testing other things.
I mean, if cloud images do boot with systemd, the big piece that we can enable is to run out-of-package tests with systemd booted, because at the moment all of our testing does use cloud images and it does boot with upstart, and it stays booted with upstart.
Yeah, so I don't want to make any commitment on this call with regards to the server on the and the OpenStack team with regards to systemd for 1410. I think what we should do is have some discussion. I think a discussion coming out of this meeting today would be great. I think should happen, and figure out what we can do and what's realistic.
Yeah. I mean, I do have to start a blueprint with loads of work items, and it would be like, it's a blueprint to plan blueprints, right? Such that we know what work will need to be targeted.
Basically, I would say at this point, your blueprint just a dump of what's in all of your guys' head, and we may have to postpone things to a later one, but it's better to have it listed and postpone than to miss it.
It's an interesting dependency as well that Dimitri mentions, that auto-package tests want to be running in a systemd environment, and as a server team we are producing those cloud images. We need to switch that to systemd at least as an option in order to hold up the auto-package tests for everything else in the archive as we do on the migration. There's a kind of circular thing in there, and we're at the point where we need to break that circular dependency, and that's something that we probably want to do pretty early on.
I mean, you would want to seed systemd on the cloud images, and after you do seed them, then we can provide hidden options in somewhere of how to boot them, and boot them with systemd by default, for example, or make cloud init.
Hey, Scott.
Or make
how about some user
init
data
be
to
booted
define
into systemd. Huh?
Yeah. Scott, cloud init user data to specify whether you want upstart or systemd. You can arrange that, right?
So you could sort of do that. I mean, it reboots in one case, right? In the case
Correct.
where you told it to and it recognizes there's a kernel upgrade. It could take an option that says use systemd and then just come up to the point where it recognizes that and then reboot, make that happen and reboot. And
Yeah. And
That
then
might
it
be a
would
good
fail,
migration
and that
point.
would be funny.
You could do that. I think that makes a ton of sense, actually. I know it sounds silly, but for auto package testing, then if we got that path working, then all of the auto package tests could start testing systemd based systems, and users would be able to switch at an appropriate time when they're ready. They'll be able to test systemd out just by flipping that switch, and then at some point we flip the default.
There's a question on IRC, and then I have a question for Scott. So the question on IRC from G Quigs is, so we might run a mix of systemd and upstart depending on the image for 1410.
Well, at the moment, we're planning to ship 1410 with upstart, but if things pan out really well, and a lot of work goes into systemd integration, desktop might default to boot with systemd. Server might default to boot with systemd, but it's really up to the key product owners to make that decision and make sure that things have been migrated. And I think it's very far-reaching to say that server might be able to do the switch, given all the things that we've discussed today already.
I am pretty comfortable. And Scott, I'm checking what you're saying. We're not 1410. We're not.
I'd say that. I mean, yeah, that's not going to happen. But I would say if we're going to do 1604, then 1504 is a requirement, right?
It's a deadline, yeah.
1504.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. Then that's what we should look to.
I mean, the plan was if 1410 doesn't happen, then we would aim to land it as soon as 1504 opens, such that the whole 1504 development cycle tries to use systemd on the relevant products, like, for example, on server and desktop and things like that. I've opened up a very interesting page, which you might find interesting. So it's a branch owned by Upstart Devel under Project Upstart, and it's called Upstart Jobs. What it has is that it scans the Debian SID, which is also known as unstable, and it tracks utopic, or current development release, and it fetches all init scripts and all systemd units that are out there and all the Upstart jobs. And it's very good type of resource to compare the parity and quickly scan and find things that are missing units in one init system but have them in the other. And it has proven useful a lot already when we were working on certain issues that we were finding out. So as a resource to anybody who wants to do archive-wide migrations, then this is a good resource for you to use. Well, or somebody who would work on OpenStack and needs to find every single thing that depends on your Upstart job, because obviously, or to find whether all of your dependencies have been ported to systemd units and things like that.
Okay. So Scott, my question for you is: so do you see anything that needs to be done in the 1410 time frame for Cloud Init?
Yeah, the Cloud Init jobs need to be done better. There was already work that I had kind of expecting to improve some of the way that it works in Upstart, so that'll have to be done. But yeah, I mean, essentially we need to get those. I think that's a requirement. We have to get that functioning and booting in systemd by 1410.
For 1410, okay. And then I think we should now, another discussion is just what other work we should do in 1410 to position us for success in 1504. But we can you continue that discussion? So Dimitri, the link that where you're at right now, can you paste that into the IRC channel?
Yep. It is updated with cron running from my machine, so if my machine is healthy, then that branch is updated. If my machine is not healthy, then it doesn't.
Due to maybe a system demigration or something.
I mean, various things have happened at sea, you know.
So APW is asking on IRC, is there a good example for what one needs if you only have an upstart job?
Yes, as we found out, we have this magical migration guide, which helps you to write the systemd unit. And
did you paste that URL in IRC earlier?
And I've now pasted that URL again.
Perfect.
And in general, you should write a systemd job, right? That would be the easiest thing if you only have an upstart job, because it does mean that you probably do not have reverse dependencies in init scripts. If init scripts are also depending on you somehow, then things get trickier, and it might be beneficial to write sysv5 init script instead. In general, I would try to guide people to just write systemd jobs. But keep the upstart job installed. Do not uninstall it. Do not remove it. Do not purge it. rm conf file from dpackage is not your friend.
Okay. Any other questions? So we'll just pause for a second to see if there's any more questions on IRC, or if anyone on the call here. Corey, Ryan, any questions from you guys?
No.
Okay, cool.
No, I think I'm in pretty good shape. I guess the only thing that I have is kind of an observation, is that, and I think Scott, you and I at the sprint had talked about this a bit, is trying to figure out how we know, what the ultimate impact is on things like boot time, performance, etc. Because I think, there was a lot of work done to really make Ubuntu boot very quickly using upstart and asynchronous jobs and such. So, just curious what what the impression is of what the impact will be once we're at 1610, for example, and what if we're measuring that somewhere. I know that there are some kernel tests that do log and graph the boot time over time, and I think those will be interesting to watch for perhaps boot time regression. But Dimitri, do you have any predictions along those lines?
Well, at the moment, the boot time with systemd is faster because it does less, and not all of the things run, right? So
hey, that's today,
awesome. Exactly, the boot time has improved. What could you ask else?
Perfect.
Perfect, right? In a real world, upstart boot performance has bitrotted quite a bit. So it was at its highest peak during Lucid, and it was pretty good at precise time, but since precise it did degrade quite a bit. I did try to fix it up before trust release, and I did fix a few issues that did came up, but unfortunately it hasn't been maintained on the same level. We do have some metrics for upstart, but we're not running any metrics with systemd yet, and that we can start doing that once, somewhere around 1504, 1510 time. My prediction is that, well, it should stay the same and not get worse than it is today, right? Whether it can become faster than Lucid, I don't know yet. We'll see. But the other thing about the boot issue is that it didn't actually become more critical over time. So because people migrated from spinning drives to SSDs, and suddenly their boot speed performed without doing anything, right? Because your disk became faster. And disk I/O is pretty much the only thing that's blocking the boot most of the time, or sets the baseband the lowest value you can get from boot speed. Similarly, as servers migrate to SSDs and even better hard drives, then those accelerate in boot speed as well. So I'm not that worried.
But I think it is a good point to get a baseline. Now, so MS Wart asked a question on IRC. Pity created a systemd PPA for 1404. Are there any plans to update this from time to time to allow basic experiments with an LTS version?
Right. PT has created a system DPPA, and that's out of date by now, and it's not recommended to use anymore. Right. So the problem with running
so the
system
answer is no. There aren't plans to update it.
No,
Stop using it. Okay.
No, don't use it at all. The reason is that we had to rebuild about 200 packages already to get their init scripts running, and we have to rebuild every single package which has init scripts to enable them to run under systemd. And no, we're not gonna SRU that. It's not SRU worthy. We can't SRU all of the utopic essentially into.
So if you want to experiment, go to 1410.
Yeah, if you want to experiment, start a VM, launch utopic on it, and that's your experimentation environment. You know.
Okay. All right. Well, we're pretty much out of time.
Right.
So thank you so much, Dimitri. I think this was a very interesting discussion, and I think we have some follow-up discussions to have around what we want to do.
True.
From the server team perspective, et cetera. And I think, yeah, but we'll go from there. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.